when you're down to nothing, God is always up to something. David was down to nothing. He lost his rights when Saul branded him an outlaw, and he had to flee the country and live among the Philistines. He was a fugitive. He acted like a madman in order to survive at the bottom of the battle. But God was up to something. Suddenly King Saul was killed in a battle. David was established as the king of Israel. You see, when you're down to nothing, God is always up to something. Hezekiah, the king of Judah, was down to nothing when he found himself surrounded by the army of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria. Sennacherib demanded surrender and reminded Hezekiah that he had already conquered and sacked many cities, killing the leaders and dragging everyone into slavery. The gods of those cities couldn't save them. He said, what makes you think that Jehovah can save Jerusalem? Hezekiah tore his clothes and put on sackcloth. He was at the bottom of the battle, but God was up to something. The prophet Isaiah prophesied Sennacherib's doom, and sure enough, that night the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 of Sennacherib's soldiers. So Sennacherib broke camp, hightailed back to Assyria, and stayed there until two of his sons assassinated him. You see, when you're down to nothing, God is always up to something. In 2 Kings 4, we find a prophet's widow. A prophet's widow down to nothing. When her husband died, he left behind a debt. The woman came to Elisha and told him that the husband's creditors was coming to take the two boys, to sell them into slavery, to satisfy the debt. She was in despair. She was at the bottom of the battle. She was a mother horrified at the thought of losing her children. But God was up to something. Elisha asked her, what do you have in your house? She said, I have nothing but this little bit of oil. So Elisha told her to go to her neighbors and collect all the empty containers. And you know the story. They brought hundreds of containers. And the prophet Elisha, he just started pouring. And he just posed like this in free stuff. And these boys just moved those barrels until they were all full, and they had enough money from selling the oil to pay off the creditors and to live more comfortably than they otherwise had. She obeyed, and from one small vessel she filled everything, paid off the debt, and had enough money to live on. When you're down to nothing, God is always up to something. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were down to nothing when Nebuchadnezzar condemned them to death in the fiery furnace. But God was up to something, because when they were thrown in, they were not harmed. But not only that, Daniel 3:30 says that King Nebuchadnezzar promoted them in the province of Babylon. You see, when you're down to nothing, God is always up to something. Ezekiel was down to nothing. He was a young priest who lost his country to war and was carried off into captivity in Babylon. The temple in Jerusalem had been trashed, and he had no place to practice the priesthood. His professional life was over. He was nothing but somebody's slave now. He was at the bottom of the battle, but God was up to something. In an instant, God reformulated Israel's theology. He appeared to Ezekiel in a vision in a fiery cloud with 4 living winged creatures whose appearance were like burning coals, riding wheels within wheels, as the glory of God descended to the earth there beside the Kibar River in Babylon. And above the expanse over their heads was a throne of sapphire, and above the throne was the figure of a man glowing with the glory of the Lord. And you can read it in Ezekiel chapter 2. You see, God is not confined to a temple in Jerusalem. God is not confined to the borders of Israel. God is not confined to church ritual. God is much more, much bigger, much holier, much more awesome than the children of Israel could imagine. God was on the throne, and his throne is all over the earth, and he cannot be confined to a box or a room or a church. God is sovereign, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. He hasn't abandoned his people in a foreign land. Instead, he was present with them, and through Ezekiel provided a prophet to lead them in the time of captivity. when you're down to nothing, God is always up to something. Peter was down to nothing, a miserable failure after denying Christ 3 times. He was at the bottom of the barrel, but God was up to something. Jesus met Peter on the shoreline of Galilee, restored his confidence, restored his faith, restored his position in the kingdom. And on the day of Pentecost, Peter got up and delivered a powerful sermon and then sat down without even giving an altar call. People were convicted on the spot and asked what they must do to be saved. That day, 3,000 new believers were baptized in water. When you're down to nothing, God is always up to something. Paul and Silas were severely beaten and thrown into prison for casting out a demon out of a girl. They were down to nothing, but there in that dank, dark dungeon, they began singing. At midnight, they were having a prayer meeting. At midnight, they were having a praise meeting. And the other prisoners were listening to them. Christian people at Henderson, friends of God, people are observing you under pressure. What do they see? Suddenly, there was an earthquake. The prison doors flew open. The guard was about to take his life when Paul shouted, "Don't harm yourself with all here." And as a result, the jailer and his whole household became believers and were baptized. When you're down to nothing, God is always up to something. The Apostle John, confined to Patmos, down to nothing, in the Aegean Sea. It's a difficult spot when you're a preacher and there's nobody to preach to. All you see is rocks and surf and sea. But John was at the bottom of the barrel, but God was up to something. And suddenly he was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And the Lord Jesus appeared to him. And the result is the book of Revelation. The amazing book, the only book in the Bible that promises a blessing if you read it. The last book in the Bible, comfort and assurance to Christians through all the ages. His situation looked hopeless, but he was able to influence the church from exile. When you're down to nothing, God is up to something. I wonder if God is still up to something today. What do you think? Are you feeling down to nothing? I want to assure you that God is up to something. A young man had been to Wednesday night Bible study. The pastor had shared about listening to God and obeying the Lord's voice. The young man couldn't help but wonder, does God still speak to people? And after the service, he went out with some friends for coffee and pie, and they discussed the message. Several different ones talked about how God had led them in different ways. And it was about 10 o'clock at night when that young man started driving home. And sitting in his car, he just began to pray, and this is what he prayed. He said, God, if you still speak to people, speak to me. I will listen. I will do my best to obey. And as he drove down the main street of his town, he had the strangest thought. Stop and buy a gallon of milk. He shook his head and said out loud, God, is that you? He didn't get a reply and continued on towards home. But again the thought, stop and buy a gallon of milk. The young man thought about Samuel and how he didn't recognize the voice of God, and how little Samuel ran to Eli. And so he said, okay God, in case that is you, I will buy the milk. He didn't seem like too hard a test of obedience, because he could always use the milk afterwards. And so he stopped and he bought a gallon of milk, and he started off towards home. And as he passed 7th Street, he again felt the urge, turn down this street. This is crazy, he thought, and drove on past the intersection. Again he felt that he should turn down 7th Street. At the next intersection, he turned back and headed down 7th Street. And jokingly he said out loud, okay God, I will. And he drove several blocks when suddenly he felt that he should stop. And he pulled over to the curb and he looked around, and he was in a semi-commercial part of town. It wasn't the best of neighborhoods, But it wasn't the worst of neighborhoods either. The businesses were closed and most of the houses looked dark, like the people were already in bed. And again he sensed something. Go and give the milk to those people in the house across the street. The young man looked at the house. It was dark. And it looked like the people were either gone or they were already asleep. He started to open the door, and then he sat back in the car seat. Lord, this is crazy. Those people are asleep, and if I wake them up, they're going to be mad, and I will look stupid, and they may even beat me up. Again, he felt like he should go and give them milk. And finally, he opened the door. Okay, God, if this is really you, I will go to the door and I will give them the milk. And if you want me to look like a crazy person, okay, I want to be obedient. And I guess that will count for something. But if they don't answer right away, I'm out of here. So he walked across the street and rang the doorbell. And he could hear some noise inside. And a man's voice shouted out, "Who is it? What do you want?" And then the door opened before the young man could get away. The young man was standing there in his jeans and t-shirt. He looked like he had just gotten out of bed, the man. He had a strange look on his face and he didn't seem too happy to have some stranger standing on his doorstep. "What is it?" The young man thrust out the gallon of milk. "Here, I brought this for you." The man took the milk and rushed down the hallway, speaking loudly in Spanish. Then from down the hallway came a woman carrying the milk towards the kitchen. The man was following her, holding a baby. The baby was crying. The man had tears streaming down his face. And the man began speaking and half crying. He said, "We were just praying. We had some big bills this month and we ran out of money. And we didn't have any milk for our baby. And I was just praying and asking God to show me how to get some milk." His wife in the kitchen poured out. I asked him to send an angel with some. "Are you an angel?" The young man reached into his wallet and pulled out all the money he had on him and put it in the man's hand. He turned and walked towards his car with tears streaming down his face. He knew firsthand that God still answers prayers. When you're down to nothing, God is always up to something.